My role, I'm a youth worker. By profession, I'm a youth worker. Work with young people, a lot of whom who have mental health issues. On this day, I'd been in my office, and a young person who's an ex-participant in one of our services came into my office, highly anxious and a very bad state. Brought me aside into a different room, said he wanted to talk to me, and said, in his own words, "My head's melted." And I asked what the problem was, and he started to talk and then showed me his body, which was covered in slashes, which he later told me he'd made with a glass from a broken ashtray that he smashed up and spent the night cutting himself up. We went out and we chatted things over for a while, and eventually he says, "Do you think I need help?" And I says, "Yes, I think you do." He says, "I'm going to sign myself in." And he had the notion that he was just going to turn up at the mental health unit within the matter and sign himself in, as he said, to the unit there. And he said, "I'll be there for 2 weeks. He'll spend 2 weeks assessing me, and then I'll be able to get help." That was what he thought. And I was saying to him, it might not necessarily be like that, but he was saying, "No, that's the way it'll be. That's the way I'm going to get help." He wanted to go there specifically because he'd seen a doctor there previously. So he went up to the flat, packed his bag full of stuff that he reckoned he'd need for 2 weeks, photos of his son, toiletries, all that sort of stuff. We went down into to the matter, to flat 10 as he called it. And we went into the waiting room, and there was a receptionist there, then some other people waiting. And we went to the receptionist and explained that he wanted to see somebody. And she asked why, and we discreetly sort of outlined why, explained that he'd been self-harming and he'd had some thoughts of killing himself. Then she said, "Well, I'll see if there's somebody who can talk to you. The clinic's not actually on at the minute. We'll see if there's somebody who can talk to you." So after a while, the sort of 10, 15 minutes or so, a psychiatric nurse came out. And he came out, and we were sitting in the waiting area still, and he sat down beside us, other people sitting beside us, and he said, "So what seems to be the problem?" And I said, "Can we talk somewhere a bit more private, please?" And he went, "No, there is nowhere." And I was saying, "Well, there must be somewhere. We can talk, surely within the clinic, we can talk somewhere." He said, "No, there isn't anywhere." And I was going, "Well, come on, can you not give us something?" He said, "Well, what about out here?" And we went out through the doors that we'd came in, which took us out onto the corridor, which opened up onto the street. He said, "We can talk out there if you like," which was slightly more private, given that there weren't people sitting right next to us. There's still people coming and going. And then out there, we went outside, standing in the corridor, and we outlined the issues, that he had been harming himself all night, that he had thoughts of killing himself. And he briefly touched on some of the roots of his problems that have led him to feeling like that. Now, this isn't an under 18-year-old. I'm a youth worker, but I work with young people up to 25. And this guy is an ex-participant on one of our schemes. So he was 23. But he was still somebody very much in need of support. He wouldn't have been there unless I'd been there to support him. It's not, I know you've got me down as a mental health advocate. The specialism I had with him was that I've known him a long time. I've known him since he was about 14, so I was in that, have a trusted relationship with him. He had confidence in me. He could talk to me about things. That was a specialism I've had, if you know what I mean. And anyway, we talked to this nurse, explained what the problems were, and he said, "Well, the clinic's closed. There's nothing we can do." And he literally shrugged his shoulders and said, "That's it, nothing we can do. Go to your GP," he said. And I said, we need help right here, right now, from a mental health specialist. And he went, well, the clinic's closed, nothing we can do. The doctor he normally sees isn't here, sorry. And he said, the other option is go to A&E. And the young man I was with him, I said, no way, there's no chance I'm going there, sitting there in a room full of people, having to wait for ages to get seen, not a chance. And I said, I said to the nurse, this guy can't be left overnight. He's at risk of serious harm, he's at risk of killing himself. He can't be left. And the nurse said to me, well, can you sit with him? Can you stay with him tonight, maybe go home with him? And I said, well, no, I can't. I live somewhere out of town. And I explained to him, I've suffered from epilepsy. I've got a particular medication by a particular time. It's important that I get that. And aside from that, I'm not trained in mental health. And I said to him, well, what happens if he suddenly feels like he's going to harm himself again and he gets very anxious? And I said, oh, we'll get 2 security staff to come and sit with him. And I said, are you serious? You're saying you're going to get 2 people who are security trained to come and sit with him? And they say, yeah, they'll stop him from hurting himself. And I couldn't believe it. And then at this point, the young man got very agitated, and a lot of the time he was there, he wanted to just leave. He was going, there's no point, Matt, we should just go. There's no point, I'm not going to get any help here. And I was saying, no, come on, we'll stay. And he broke off a bit of, there's those magazine stands you find in health waiting areas. He broke off a bit of the plastic from one of those and said, what do I have to do? Do I have to slice my wrists? Will you see me then? What about my throat? And he held to his throat and started to cut it into his throat. And he broken off sort of a triangular bit that was really sharp, and he really could have done himself some damage. And I held his arms and started talking to him, and eventually got him to calm down a bit. And I was worried at that point that security staff were going to be called then, and we'd end up being in some sort of situation where the police might be called, which would have just only made the problem worse. So I suggested we go out onto the street where he could calm down and we could chat things over a bit more. So we did that, and then shortly after that, the 2 security staff did come out of the entrance that we'd come out of and stood watching us for a while. I can't say for sure whether they were called because of us, but that's what happened. Excuse me. So after chatting for a while, we came to the conclusion, I persuaded him the only way to get seen by anybody was to go to the A&E in the matter. So we did that. We went in, there was a packed waiting room. And which was one of the reasons why I didn't want to go there in the first place, because you had to talk to the receptionist behind the safety screen, the perspex stuff, and explain what the problem was. Say he had been hurting himself and he felt like killing himself. So we tried to do it as quietly as we could, and I tried to help him do that, but he had to do some of that himself. And they said, I'd take a seat and triage, we'll see you soon. Then after a while we saw a triage nurse. A triage nurse came and brought us into another room, and she was very nice, she was very helpful, respectful, talked to him in a very seemed like a caring manner, which is very different from the original nurse we'd seen in the psychiatric department. But the only place where she could talk to him was in another area with lots of other people milling around. There was other nurses, other professionals, and also seeing other patients who were there. And he again had to go through what the issues were, what the problems were. He felt like killing himself, and touching on some of the things which had led to this, which were sort of around personal and family issues. And she said he would have to wait for somebody to come from one of the other hospitals to do an assessment. So we went into the waiting room again and waiting for a number of hours. We had to, during all this time, he would have left several times, but I was persuading him to stay. And no, you came here to get help. You've got to this stage, you may as well stay a bit longer. A number of times he went up and asked at reception, how did he know how much longer it was going to be? And they were very abrupt with him, tutting and sighing. Now, he wasn't rude or aggressive at any point, but if he was someone you saw approaching you in the street, he's tall, he's sort of 6'3", tattoos, scars. He might be intimidating to some people. You could maybe presume from how they were treating him, that might have been what they were feeling. But at no point was he rude or saying anything aggressive. He was just saying, how much longer is it going to be? How much longer do I have to wait? Are they really coming? You know. Anyway, they did come in the end, and they brought us through the A&E department. And initially they didn't want me to come into the room with them where they could assess him. And he was saying, I'm not going in, no chance. Either he comes in or not. And they were saying, no, you have to come in by yourself. You have to talk to us by yourself. And he was saying, I'm leaving then. I'm not coming. I'm going now. And I had a chat to them then and explained the process by which it had been for him to come there, but how important it was that he has seen, and that if I wasn't in the room, he was going to leave, and how much it had taken in terms of his sort of admitting that he needed help to get there, and it was important that he got help. So they were okay then that I came into the room. I said I would just go into the room just to be there. I wasn't going to say anything or contribute to anything unless I was specifically asked. And they were very good with him, very gentle, and what I spoke to him, what I felt was respectful. They didn't talk down to him. They didn't treat him as if he was trying to intimidate them, or didn't act as if they should be scared of him. Offered him help. At the time, they offered him help from the self-harm team, and he said no, he didn't want that. He has since said he did want help from them. I've been trying to track them down, who they were. I haven't been able to find out who they were to try and get the help that they offered him then, because it's after a couple of weeks I've sort of said, listen, it would be good if you did get that help. He hasn't been able to get it since. That's been one of the difficulties. But the only problem really with seeing them was that they took a long time to come, and he would have left had I not been there, and that they asked me to leave. You know, it could have been, if I hadn't been sort of had that chat with him and persuaded him that I had to be there, he might have left and not been seen. One of the other issues was he had these terrible scars all over his body, terrible. I mean, at that point there were cuts that were still oozing and some bleeding. And at no point at all did anyone say, can we look at those? Can we treat those for you? You know, there were things that have now left scars that'll be there forever. And no one actually said, can we look at those? You know, people saw them. The psychiatric nurse saw them, the triage nurse saw them. The two psychiatric assessors saw them. But no one said, shall we do something about those, you know? And eventually he was sent home. He was deemed to be not at risk of immediately taking his life, and sent home. And thankfully they were right, he hasn't.
And just to ask, when they sent him home, was he in a less agitated state than he'd been in earlier, once they'd actually seen him and talked to him? I mean, did you have a sense of when they said to him to go home at that point, were you less worried than other times when he was almost kind of curtly told, you can either go home or go to AA or go and see your GP, and at that point you were really worried that he was going to self-harm? Was there a difference by the time you got to the end of that process and he'd actually seen the two people who took a bit of time to listen to him? Were you reassured that sending him home at that stage was a reasonable thing to do?
I wasn't sure that sending home was a reasonable thing to do. I had to take their professional opinion on it, but I was much more confident than I was than when I'd arrived. Ironically, that was because we had a chance to talk over lots of things, sitting in A&E for those hours and chatting things over, and all the issues that he was experiencing, his family and personal stuff that I was referring to. It was because of that. So in a way, the long wait helped things in that sense, you know. But
sure.
But at the same time, the long wait might have meant he'd gone home. But he didn't actually get any treatment when he was there, if you know what I mean. He got assessed, which was important, obviously. But it was by default rather than by treatment.
And one final question from me. Looking back on that experience as somebody who accompanied somebody to A&E, if you were then looking now at managers and clinicians and others, and you were saying what you should do differently, what would your advice be to the Mater Hospital and those people who are in charge of delivering services and planning services and managing them?
Well, there's a couple of things, I suppose. One would be have services right here, right now, for people who come in suffering from mental health issues. I mean, we have in Northern Ireland, I know this because I went to it recently, a regional acute eye service. If you go in with an injured eye, there's an A&E specifically for eye services. Why don't we not have that for mental health services? There's a seriously high rate of suicide amongst young people, young men specifically, particularly. Why do we not have that for mental health services? Take that seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Privacy is a huge thing. You know, people have a right to be seen in private, as well as having the right to have their health needs met. And he had obviously the mental health needs, but he also had those physical health needs. He had these cuts all over his body. Why were they not seen as well? Did people just say, well, it's like you've got a hierarchy of health issues. I'm only going to treat these ones up here. We're not going to bother about these ones down here. If I'd have gone in and said, I've got these cuts all over my body, but I haven't got a mental health problem, these would have been treated. People would have gone, oh my God, they would have treated me. Mm-hmm. But they didn't. They need to treat them all. They need to treat the whole person. The waiting times, obviously, is an issue. And also things around allowing people need to have that support, particularly people with mental health issues, to be able to have supporters there when they need them. I mean, this guy wouldn't be hugely articulate. You know, if he'd been told no about things, he would either just clear off, or he might have got angry about things. He wouldn't have been able to make the arguments in such a way where people would have accepted them. Mm-hmm. They might have just said, well, he's gone now, or called security, as quite possibly did happen. So that people need supporters, and it doesn't need to be people who are trained in mental health. It doesn't need to be people who have got degrees in psychology or psychiatry. It just needs to be people who can spend the time with them, who have that relationship with them, who they trust, who can take them to the next stage, who can be there to metaphorically or physically hold their hand, you know. I think that's really important, and it's important for young people specifically. I mean, this guy, as I said, wasn't a child. He's in his early 20s. You know.
Okay, thank you. Maren, is there anything you want to ask?
No, thank you, Matthew. Thank you very fully set out your essence. Thank you very much.
Paul?
Just to thank you, Matthew. you've been very clear in your written statement, and you've amplified it, and it's terribly helpful. And thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you.
And I just want to again reiterate my thanks, and in particular, it's really useful for us to hear as well from people who have accompanied people to A&E, as well as people who've had the experience directly, because again, this inquiry, it's really important. It's not just about, and we recognise as a human right, not just how people are treated with respect and dignity as the person receiving care and the quality of care. It's about how those people who attend with people are treated as well, and that's really important. So thanks again. That's really important evidence for us. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.